realistic options for the Bucks in this draft. We know they're picking 10th. Are they picking anywhere else? We start to dig through some of those names coming up next.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Bucks. I am Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That is odoo.com/lockedon. And in addition to Camille and myself, we're joined today by Nathan of No Ceilings as we're starting to take a look at some of these prospects, and it's been a wide range, Nathan, of guys that have been mocked to the Bucks or just generally mocked in that area. And like the other component that I kind of mentioned, and Camille and I have talked about as well, is, I mean, as of right now, they're picking 10. They could be picking 10 and 13. They could be picking, I mean, 5th is a possibility. They could be picking 10 and 27. So there's a very, very wide range that's out there. But I think since we know 10 is a thing, we start there. And I was asking you before we started recording of, hey, some guys that are like realistically in that range of where the Bucks are. Who's your favorite and who stands out to you the most? And Camille can't even hide it. She's already beaming ear to ear. But the one guy that you brought up immediately when I said, who is your favorite, is music to the ears of Camille, and that is Cameron Carr.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll get into it where No Ceilings is currently mocking. We have a mock draft dropping the same day. Likely this podcast is coming out. Our most recent update, we're going to have Cameron Carr going to the Milwaukee Bucks at number 10. And it's something where I kind of actually swayed the room on it a little bit, and I don't necessarily have Cameron Carr at 10th overall on my board, but I'm just trying to think about and piece together where the Milwaukee Bucks are at now and where they're going to go, right? Like you guys have been talking about it, like the Giannis trade's probably going to happen at some point over the next week. We don't know where he's going to go, but we know he's probably not going to be on the Bucks next season. So what position they find themselves in is fascinating because this isn't a team that has control of the draft for the next however many years, unless they get Portland involved in that Giannis deal and they get some of those picks back. So they're not necessarily going to be bottoming out. They want to still remain competitive in the Eastern Conference, but you also have to balance short-term competitiveness with long-term growth and upside. I think Cameron Carr actually blends both of those together quite nicely. He's a 6'5" athlete out of Baylor, plays the wing position, has a 7'1" wingspan, has the measurables, the athleticism you want out of that particular position. Lights out shooter, one of the top 5 shooters, probably a top 3 shooter in all honesty in this draft class when you really grade everybody out. Has the defensive playmaking chops to really be active on that end of the floor, can cover space, can guard multiple positions. One of the best wing shot blockers, arguably the best wing shot blocker in this entire class. He just has a blend of skills that really complement each other and complement what a team wants to do in the short term. And then if he continues to grow as a ball handler, if he continues to develop as an on-ball playmaker, someone who can be a secondary option within an offense or even a tertiary option and not just a spot-up athletic transition type of player, then we're talking about a guy, again, with his tools who has a much higher ceiling than we might even be anticipating and someone who can really develop into a second contract darling for this Milwaukee Bucks team. So I think he can help them remain competitive in the short term, but also has that type of runway that I think Bucks fans would be excited to bring into the building long term.
See, as Justin said, that is music to my ears. Once I started digging into Cam Carr's like film and just the reviews and the scouts, I was just like, he's just an interesting blend of talent in a draft that doesn't really have too many like top tier wing options, especially when you're looking at two-way wing options. So could you talk a little bit more about the wing class in this particular draft? Because the names that we've thrown out as options for the Bucks leading up to this point of this conversation today have been, the Cameron Carrs, talking about Dalen Swain a little bit, Nate Ament, and even Yaxel Lendeborg, but I kind of view him more of like a 4 than a true wing. But what would you say about the crop of wings in this class, especially for a team that has a lottery pick?
Yeah, it depends entirely about how you categorize these players. I mean, we can get cute and we can call AJ DeBonsa and Nate Ament, wings, necessarily not forwards. We can even put Yaxel in that category, but most of those guys are potentially going to be off the board, and some of them certainly they will be off the board by the time the Bucks pick. But really, when we get down to where's the depth of this class, it's kind of everywhere but the wing position. Like there's a few nice bigs that you can find in this particular range. Obviously, the guard and the class is guard heavy, like you guys have been talking about. There's a number of good forward options, especially as you get later down this draft. But wings, like you just said, it's Cameron Carr, it's Dalen Swain, and then there is a considerable drop off to where you'd be finding some of those guys next. Like I think what really hurt the depth of this wing class was like when Tunde Yesfu, for example, decided to go back to school, go to St. John's for a big NAL bag. Like that could have been a really fun guy to find maybe a little bit later in the 20s of this draft at that particular position. So there really are not a lot of options on the board. I don't necessarily think that means that any team is going to be jumping to like trade up in the draft to get a wing necessarily, but I do think it means that you're going to have guys like Carr and maybe even Swain to an extent go a lot earlier than some are anticipating. Like I'm not a Dalen Swain guy, for example. I don't have him terribly high on my board. I wouldn't even think about him with the 10th pick, to be entirely honest with you. But like Cameron Carr, who we were once projecting in like the 15 to 25 range in this draft. I think Charlotte at 18 has been a very popular spot for him in mocks. I still think he's going to go higher than that because I think teams are going to convince themselves that, the wing position is a primary role of need that every NBA team needs. They need to fill that spot. And I think teams are going to talk themselves into what he could become and why, again, given the scarcity at that position, he's projected to go higher than I think a lot of people think.
Who is the, in your mind, most volatile guy in this range in the lottery? Is it Nate Ament? Because it seems like majority is hate, but you either love him or you hate him. Is there somebody else that comes to mind?
No, Nate Ament can be one of those answers. So Maxwell Baumbach and I, who's my co-host on the episodes that we do for Locked On NBA Draft and Those Ceilings, we did an episode exercise where we went through superlatives and we started off the show with a banger. We went, who's that lottery guy? Who's potentially the scariest to draft? He went with Nate Ament for a variety of reasons. I actually said Aday Mara because I would be concerned if I'm using a very high pick. And when I say very high, I'm talking anywhere from that 5 to 12 range. Like he's been mocked a lot of the time. I'd be very concerned about taking a player who I'm not even sure is going to play 25 minutes a night in the NBA. And I understand he can be impactful in the minutes that he does, but given the talent that's in this draft, it's been billed as a 4-player draft at the very top, rightfully so. But I think all the way 5 to 14 and even into the 20s, I think there's a lot of players in this class who they may not have superstar upside, but they have like really high level starter contributor as a floor like written all over them. I think this is a very deep draft. And I think if you pass on one of these creative guards who does have quote unquote star written on them as a potential label for a big man like Aday Mara, who I'm not quite certain what I'm going to get out of him on a night to night basis. They're, guys that size, we know there's always some potential health questions with drafting a player like that. I think a lot of people got excited about Mara because of what we saw from Zach Edey 2 drafts ago, when all of a sudden he rose up the draft incredibly high. And I think with Edey, the thing about him was that he played a lot of minutes at Purdue. He took on a lion's share of that offense. He was a special offensive talent combined with everything you saw from him on the defensive end. You don't see that dominance from an Aday Mara on offense. He's an excellent passer for someone his size, and you can use him in different ways from that perspective at the top of the floor. And obviously with 7'3" with a 9'9" standing reach, like we know what kind of defensive presence he can be right at the basket, but he doesn't really have that dominant it factor to me like an Edey did. So I would just be very cautious about maybe taking someone like him a little bit too high.
I don't know if Camille has any follow-ups because you said all she needed to hear with the first answer that we gave, but we'll see if she has anything else left in the tank. There's a few other things about some of these guys, and we talked a lot about wings and how important that is, but the best of the bunch in the backcourt I'm curious of. So we'll continue our conversation coming up after this.
Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never even designed to work together. One app for accounting, another one for inventory, another one for sales, but somehow none of them actually talk to each other. That's where Odo comes in. Odo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every single part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales to accounting to inventory and marketing, everything just works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. And one thing that really stands out is how this organization got everyone pulling in the same direction, because it's never just one player or just one coach. It's normally a coordinated effort that comes across the entire organization that actually makes it successful. So great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/locked on. That's ODOO.com/locked on. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time, because there is more live events worth seeing than ever right now in this moment, from games and concerts and comedy shows and festivals. The hard part normally isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets to attend. Between long wait times and confusing checkout processes, surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it actually should. And that's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple, with upfront pricing, seat views before you actually buy, and exclusive saving opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. Because my biggest pet peeve when buying tickets is when you think you find a great deal, you get all the way to checkout, and then suddenly that final price looks completely different. Game Time, thankfully, takes the guesswork out by being able to see all of those fees up front. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time event or app, create an account, and use the code LOCKED ON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today.
And you can sign up for the Everyday Club, get a 7-day free trial. To do so, you can use the link in the show notes of today's episode to join. Get your 7 days for free. When you join, you get ad-free episodes of Locked On Bucks and members-only Discord access as well. We also have the most incredible NBA draft guide for you. It is all free. Every pick in a mock draft with player comps, summaries, strengths, weaknesses, everything you need to know about the NBA draft from the experts at No Ceilings, the Locked On NBA Draft Guide. You can get it for free at lockedonpodcasts.com/NBA Draft Guide. Camille, we're good, right? He said Cameron Carr. You got nothing else?
I do want to say this quickly before I even get to my next question, because the free draft guide that's provided through No Ceilings and Locked On, definitely check that out. But if you want even more depth, I got to say, Nathan, the No Ceilings draft guide that you guys did this year, the NBA Streets design, one of my favorite, first of all, designs, but the draft guide is absolutely fantastic. So to everyone listening, check out the free one provided by us as like the appetizer. But I would definitely also encourage you guys to check out the No Ceilings, a more in-depth draft guide as well. Aday, you mentioned him, and then the big. So, like, another name that has been thrown out as a possibility for the Bucks around 10 is Heinz Steinbach, where it's like, this might be a big who people look at and they're like, well, not really flashy. It's just that he's very consistent. And I've been hearing that people look at him and think like they understand where the floor is. And you understand with that, you're going to get a good player. Could you talk a little bit more about him and any other bigs you might think could be in the discussion in that lottery range for the Bucks before we get a little bit more into the guards that really are running this part of the draft?
Yeah, I mean, Steinbach is a very interesting prospect to try and consider for a team like the Bucks, when this is a team that's going to try to find and build on a brand new identity. And while you can definitely get a solid contributor in someone like Steinbach, you know he's going to give you on the glass as an interior finisher. He really showed some growth the second half of the season at Washington as like a face-up, mismatch type of ball handler. He can actually attack a little bit downhill and make some opponents pay. Like all of those things, especially with if you can get him to develop that jump shot are all really intriguing to build on as a 6'11" big man, has good size, good length. I'm not quite sure he's an imposing threat defensively. As a center, I think he's much better at the power forward position, playing alongside another big man. Don't necessarily know who that would be in particular in Milwaukee, so I don't know if we're setting him up for short-term success in a situation like that, but he is someone intriguing that you can look at and say, well, he is young. He's been productive now, through the FIBA U19s for Germany, playing alongside like guys like Christian Andersen. He was very productive at the University of Washington, even though didn't necessarily lead to a lot of wins at the University of Washington. Don't necessarily think that was his fault. Would be very interesting to try and look at, but I think my favorite big man in this draft is Morez Johnson. And that wasn't my answer a few months ago, but it certainly has become my answer when you factor in everything that I've gone back and watched on tape, seeing a lot of the measurables, the athleticism, what was on display, and what I've gotten to hear about and see from the NBA draft combine. He fits the mold of someone who I want playing in the playoffs, period. He's 6'9", 7'3.5" wingspan, 250 plus pounds. He's rock solid. He's strong. He's steady. He has great feet. Like, in this draft, I've had a lot of conversations about him related to the OKC Thunder because there is no Victor Wembanyama stopper on the face of the earth. But if I'm trying to figure out who I want guarding him, and I'm trying to build a player in the lab who I think would have a chance, I think Morez would actually be the best option. I've seen Aday Mara be that guy that's come up in conversation just because of how big he is, 7'3" with that 9'9" standing reach, like I said earlier. But a lot of what Victor Wembanyama likes to do against opposing forwards and bigs is take them out on the perimeter and really utilize his ball handling ability to get downhill and create shots against those players away from the basket. Morez Johnson's not going to let that happen. Morez Johnson's going to put his shoulder into Wemby, knock him off of his spot. He has the feet to keep up with him and be that coordinated type of player. So when we're talking about players who can actually match up with some of these more perimeter-oriented bigs and some of these really high-skilled 7-foot-plus guys, I think Morez actually fits that bill more than any of the other bigs that we can talk about in this draft. And even if some of the offensive stuff doesn't come around to star level, like he's not creating for himself a lot or for others, he's primarily just a play finisher. I think the 3-point shot from a standstill spot up standpoint is going to be there for him. Even if he's not a sexy creator on offense, I think everything he gives you defensively is probably going to be more valuable, especially in a playoff context, than what you're going to get from some of these other big men.
His teammate, Yaxel Lendeborg, is another one of those guys that it kind of seems like a team like the Bucks probably doesn't make as much sense for him. Like the sense I get in the age, obviously, is the Bucks 2 years ago, the Bucks 3 years ago. If you have this type of pick and you need we're going to keep the pick, and can he step in and help us now? Is he the most plug and play ready in this draft contributor? Not like superstar, but yeah, I don't think this guy's going to kill us. We can play him rotational minutes.
I think if everything works out for him, he has top 5 talent potentially in this draft. I actually don't think that's crazy to say at all. I think a lot of smart evaluators, myself included, have had him very high on their boards. And I think with a team like the Milwaukee Bucks, like we talked about in the first segment, I think it actually might make some sense if that's really the direction they wanted to go, to find someone who, to your point, Justin, is plug and play ready, is someone who can contribute right away, who has a blend of skills at the power forward position. We talk about dribble, pass, shoot, defend multiple positions. That fits Yaxel Lendeborg to a T. And it's a player archetype that I think, other than the on ball 30+% usage, high volume shot creator guys, the next prominent position, in my opinion, on the court when you're trying to win in the playoffs is having that forward who can dribble, pass, shoot, doesn't leave you without any options offensively, who can legitimately space out to the corner, attack off the bounce, keep the ball moving, and make everyone else around them better, and then also go out and defend multiple positions and rebound his position on that end of the floor. Like Yaxel, even if he's not the type of player who's going to go out there and score 20 to 25 plus points a game, he can still contribute to winning at a high level. He was a chameleon for that Michigan team. Like when he was at UAB a few seasons before he got to Michigan now, where they just won the national championship, he was the guy. He was a 20-plus points per game scorer. He was a high-level rebounder. He's always been an excellent defensive playmaker and passer, but he stood back and really let himself be a second or third option at times at Michigan to give Aday Mara some shine, to give Morez Johnson some shine, to give Elliot Cadeau some shine. Like, he didn't have to be the everything's going to run through me all the time. I'm going to put up these monster box score numbers. And yet when everyone watched the games and they were trying to decide who was the national player of the year in college basketball, like, if it wasn't for Cam Boozer, Yaxel would have won that award. Like, everyone still knew when they watched the games how talented this guy is. And then when you factor in what he did this year, which was adding that 3-point shot to the level that he did, he tripled his 3-point attempt rate from anywhere it was earlier in his career this year and hit his highest percentage of threes that he has in this career. Like, I get that he's an older player. I don't know if people quite understand how hard it is to do something like that just in one off season's time. But the fact that he accomplished it, and there's one more thing I'll say about the age. Yes, he's older. He's going to be 24 years old in the regular season. It's been funny, though, to hear about that criticism because college basketball itself has gotten older. Like, everyone makes the jokes like he's 24 or 23. He's going out there dominate 19-year-olds. The average age of these rosters that actually went deep into March Madness was 21 and a half years old. It's like a year and a half difference on average. So you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that Yaxel Lendeborg's too old dominating competition, but then, everyone's apparently young in college basketball when we know what NIL is doing and how it's affecting the draft. Like, you can't have it both ways. Like, I think Yaxel is still a great prospect in his own right. And I think he'd actually give the Bucks someone to really start maybe not building around, but start building through and figuring out with his strengths and what he can do on the court. Where are some of these other areas of need? How can he maybe make some of these other guys better? How can he help us evaluate the talent that's going to be left on this roster after a potential Giannis trade, whatever that looks like?
All right, we still haven't touched on the guards, so I want to get to that. And one question, too, about Camille and I had kicked around like, well, in a way, even if there isn't a trade, could the Bucks somewhat feel like they're having 2 draft picks? The explanation of that and any thoughts you have on one player that we have talked about quite a bit already through the offseason. We'll get to those things coming up after this. But first, let's talk to you about our friends over at Quo. Missed calls, slow follow-ups, those cost businesses more than they realize. Every unanswered call, forgotten text, or delayed response means a missed opportunity, a lost customer, or revenue left on the table. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo brings teams' calls, texts, and customer conversations together in one place, helping businesses stay organized, responsive, and connected. They simplify communication for an entire team. Instead of juggling multiple phones, inboxes, and message threads, everyone stays on the same page and focuses on serving customers. The more conversations you're managing, the easier it is to miss important details. That's why you'll love Quo. They automatically summarize calls and even highlight next steps, which helps teams stay organized and spend less time tracking down information. Money is on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That is quo.com/lockedonnba. All right. Before we do get to the guards, how much did you have a chance to see or follow along any developments last year and what's happened along the way with one Bucks draft picks from last year? And you're already grinning like you knew this is where I was going. Bogalub Markovic.
To be entirely honest with you, Justin, he's kind of been at the back of my mind with everything else that's been going on with this year's draft class. I thought the pick was very interesting at the time. I did get to see him, a little bit in the summer league setting. Wasn't necessarily thrilled with everything.
Wasn't memorable.
that I saw. I'll say that much. But from everything I've heard, I think he's had a really strong season overseas and is ready to come impact this Bucks team next year. I don't know what that necessarily means for, some other young talent that could be around him on this roster and maybe, how he impacts some of these other players, but sounds like he could have a pretty good, rookie season debut in the NBA at least from what I've heard.
Now, you mentioned in the last segment too, like the guys who you can feel comfortable with in a playoff setting. And when talking about like the guards in this draft class, I'm hearing like the floor is just so high. Projected floor is so high for some of these guys here. Could you talk a little bit more about the guards that we can expect to see from that, 5 to 12 range in this particular draft? And also, which of those guards do you see are like the most playoff adaptable with their games and where their games are projected to even go going forward?
Boy, it's like trying to navigate and through some rough waters, trying to figure out like who you're actually going to rank in what order among those guards, because they're also super, super talented. You have Keaton Wagler out of Illinois. You have Brayden Burries out of Arizona, Michael Brown Jr. out of Louisville, Kingston Flemings out of Houston. Those are the primary guards that you're talking about in that 5 to 9 range that are all trying to battle with each other. Of course, I can't forget about Darius Acuff either. I kind of have him as like the top of that group, in my opinion. But of those guards who could maybe slip into that 10 to 12 range, those are the others that we're talking about. And, Keaton Wagler might have one of the higher ceilings in this draft amongst the guards, primarily because he was the one guy who kind of came out of nowhere, wasn't a top 150 consensus recruit coming out of high school. And yet you saw what he did, 6'6", isn't necessarily the strongest guy, doesn't have the biggest frame, but he's so crafty with his footwork, so skilled with his touch, ability to use both hands, pass with both hands, work in different traffic, dance around guys, create his own shot. And then he has one of the best go-to moves in this draft class with that step back three, which is a weapon that every single guard has to have in their arsenal, especially given how physical the NBA is, playing guys with more size and more length on the perimeter. A lot of those gaps, a lot of those lanes, they close down pretty quick. You have to be able to score from the perimeter. I think the off the dribble 3-point shot is the most important shot that any of these guards can have. I know Wagler has it. I know Darius Acuff has it. I know Michael Brown Jr. out of Louisville has it. Like some of the stuff that he's able to do on tape, his 6'5" size, like his electric speed, his ability to change gears and make creative passes off the dribble. Like I'm not trying to say this name in terms of the negatives that it might bring up, but thinking from a positive aspect, like what LaMelo Ball looked like when he came into the NBA. Like you could just watch that guy and say, he can just do things that some of these other guys just flat out can't do. And like you feel that way when you watch the best of what Michael Brown Jr. was able to do at Louisville. You have a guy like Brayden Burries, who, to answer your question, Camille, about who might be the most playoff ready of these guards, it might be him because of what he can do on the defensive end of the floor. Again, his 6'4" size with weighing in at 215 pounds at the combine, not necessarily the longest guy, but I think he's more explosive than given credit for. He's crafty, he's shifty, a 3-level scoring threat. And then defensively, he'll go pick up whoever your best backcourt matchup is. He'll strip the ball away, he'll take it away, and he'll do everything he can to make those opponents' lives a living hell on the court. So I really like what Brayden Burries brings to the table. And then last but not least, Kingston Flemings, my biggest question with him was how good of a shooter is he going to be when he steps foot in the NBA? Shot's a little funky. He admits it's a little funky, but he holds true to himself. He says in every single level, it's always gone in, and it did go in a good percentage at Houston. It wasn't the highest volume shot of his. It wasn't the most notable thing in his repertoire, but he did make enough spot up and catch and shoot threes, and he's an electric mid-range scorer, loves getting into that painted area and pulling up. He knows how to make some other guys better. Some people can question about how good he might be away from the basketball. Does he have to have it in his hands all the time to extract the most value? But some of these other real speedsters, these quick guys, when you put them in position off the ball and you get them moving downhill or cutting to the basket or working off of another screening action, they can be just as dangerous instead of just operating and looking for that ball screen from the top of the floor. So I think all of those guys are fantastic in their own right. I think what's going to separate them as we try to determine who's going to be the best is exactly where they go. What's the fit look like? What's the other personnel look like around them? Like, I think that's going to be what determines their success and obviously their individual work ethic more than just what we were trying to gather on tape from college basketball.
Yeah, that was the last thing I was going to ask you. One of those names in Kingston Flemings, does the size concern you at all too, especially knowing he loves to live in the mid-range and difficulty of getting that shot at the NBA level, especially when some of the measurements came out from the combine? And then the other one, LeBaron Philon, is another guy that's kind of been in that range for the Bucks, and he seems like another boy. I see it, and I think it's there, or just I'm not quite there yet, guy.
I mean, the size is obviously a concern with some of these guys. I think it has to be, but I think what guys like Kingston Flemings and LeBaron Philon have proven are that they both have different characteristics that make them special in terms of creating separation and actually freeing themselves from opposing defenders. With Kingston Flemings, that first step that he has is lightning quick. He knows how to get to those spots that he wants to get to because he already has the idea in his mind, and he has the quickness to be able to match where his mind wants him to go. For LeBaron Philon, he has arguably the best ball handling skill of any of these guards in this entire class. Like when we talk about creating separation from a size up ISO perspective and stepping back and getting into his own shot in space, like Philon is probably the best guy at doing that. And so when you factor in both of those elements to their respective games, the size matters when they're trying to barrel in the traffic and finish amongst the trees. But I also think both players are smarter than that. And I think they've learned how to adapt to their surroundings and utilize what other things that make them special versus trying to be somebody that they're not. And I think that self-awareness that we saw from them in college basketball, I think that's just as important as trying to prove to somebody, hey, I can hang with these big, strong guys. Maybe I got to pull the ball back out in some of these situations. Maybe I have to do something a little bit different. I think both of those guys, for those reasons, and any of these guards that we're talking about in that range, I think they're aware of what they need to do when, and that's what makes this group of guards arguably the most special collection of guards that I've evaluated in 15 years of doing this.
Wow. I have one last question for you. If the Milwaukee Bucks do end up having 2 draft picks in the lottery, and let's say you were the GM there, would that change your approach on the type of players that you do select? Like, would you be a little bit more open to taking a shot on a prospect that makes like, hey, the development, we can see it there for him, but we're going to actually take this shot on the prospect that might need a little bit more developing. He has a high ceiling, but we're not sure about him, in addition to maybe taking someone more solid? Or what approach do you think that the Bucks should take if they do end up with 2 lottery picks in this particular draft?
Is that your kind way of asking me what it would take to draft Nate Ament, Camille?
Oh, Lord.
Kind way of
not necessarily, but like, would you feel better about it?
I mean, of course. I mean, I think it's a luxury when we're trying to come up with these mocks for these teams that have multiple first-round picks already, like the Memphis Grizzlies, like Chicago Bulls. When we're looking at who could go in that 15-16 range, you're able to bring up a name like Nate Ament to a lesser degree, but to a higher risk degree, someone like a Jaden Quaintance, for example, someone who we don't know where he's at medically, but if you get a as sure of a thing as you can possibly talk yourself into with that first pick, in that range, you can obviously swing for the fences a lot easier with that second pick. It's a lot easier to go back to your boss and say, well, at least I'm batting 50%, not batting 0. So it absolutely changes the equation. But in terms of my strategy for the Bucks, if I was trying to handle one or both picks, I'm just trying to get on base, in all honesty. Like this whole Giannis thing and whatever it's going to leave in its wake, like that's going to be enough to deal with. This team just needs to start finding guys who can step on the court and at least keep my team competitive. I'm not necessarily worried about finding the longest runway or the buzzword of the week, which is upside. Like I'm not completely worried about that. I'm trying to get good, solid guys who I can get in my building, who I trust with my developmental staff. I can bring more out of them, but in the short term, I can get them on the court. We can try and figure this thing out together.
Well, as we mentioned, all the details are out there for you in the No Ceilings NBA Draft Guide, which we have partnered with to bring you here at Locked On. You can find that right now and get the very, very latest on all of it at lockedonpodcast.com/NBA Draft Guide. And one of those individuals is Nathan Grubel, who has walked through all of this here with us today. Camille and I have been doing this thing where every show we have chosen a player we don't think will be taken by the Bucks or taken by the team that traded their pick to the Bucks. And yeah, now it's in the difficult part of, well, they could be picking in the 20s. They could be picking 13th as well. So it's getting really tough here for these final 4. I'm sure you can guess who the first 4 picks were for the Bucks. The rest of it now has become the challenge, but you can get all the insights from Nathan and his team over at No Ceilings. Nathan, appreciate all the insights on this. reaffirming some of our beliefs, especially Camille's, and some interesting names that have been kicked around. So we appreciate the time today.
No, of course. Thank you guys for having me. I think with all the coverage I've helped do with the Locked On Network, I think everyone knows who I am at this point. So certainly, in case you wouldn't, you can follow me on X at Draft Deeper, and you can follow everything we're doing at NoCeilingsNBA.com. Appreciate the nice words about the draft guide, Camille, and everything you guys are doing to help support it. Means a lot.
For sure. Thank you.
Well, thanks to everyone for making Locked On Bucks your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Mock Draft, the most comprehensive NBA draft analysis from NBA experts to college experts and NBA draft experts. Find the 2026 Locked On NBA Mock Draft on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. That'll do it for today. For Camille and Nathan, I'm Justin. We will talk with you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.